Hi, I'm Charlie. I work at the Marine Directorate, and alongside my colleagues from BIOS and UKCEH, we're going to be talking about the Prepared project, or predators and prey around renewable energy developments. In particular, we're looking at seabirds, prey and offshore wind, novel evidence on predator-prey distributions and behaviour around offshore wind farms, and use in UK impact assessments. So first, a brief overview. At the Marine Directorate, we're looking at the fish distributions in the Forth and Tay. BIOS are looking at seabird distributions, and UKCEH feeding this into Seaboard, an environmental impact assessment tool. And why are we doing this? We aim to improve confidence in environmental impact assessments by increasing the biological realism and validating tool mechanisms, and also improve the application of tools in new regions. So that's the overview, and now I'm going to kick us off with the fish side of things, or the prey side. Our objectives are to firstly understand the broad-scale ecological drivers of fish distributions to provide a baseline scenario, and secondly to assess the fine-scale effects of offshore wind farm-related variables such as turbine density. So when it comes to the data that we have for broad-scale fish distributions, we have a pretty good time series. We have a number of years of historic surveys, and then we have the prepared surveys. Starting in 2022, we've done 3. So in these, you can see the wind farm boundaries in blue. NNG and Sea Green are the only 2 with turbines in currently. And then these small triangles denote demersal stations, where we do a demersal tow looking for gadoids, flatfish, etc. And for the pelagic side of things, the sand eel, sprat and herring, you can see the dashed lines in these maps are the acoustic transects, and we ground truth these with pelagic tows. So then we come to model the distributions, and this example I'm showing here is for sand eel. So first we have our fish distribution data, in this case the acoustic survey, and we look at this alongside environmental variables such as bathymetry and percentage of silt in the substrate. And then we feed this into species distribution models. We've been using an ensemble of generalized additive models and random forests, and that allows us to look at the relationship between environmental covariates and sand eel presence and abundance. For example, we can see percentage silt has a negative effect on the probability of presence. And these models allow us to make predictions for sand eels in the Forth and Tay region. So this map shows the low areas in blue and the high areas in red. So how are these outputs being used? So the blue arrow here shows what I've just been describing, and then the prey distributions will firstly act as a baseline scenario with no wind farm effects, and we pass these on to our colleagues to look at in relation to seabirds. And secondly, we're now able to look at the effect of both the environmental and wind farm variables and any interaction between the 2 and how this might impact fish distributions. That's all for fish. I'll hand over to Catherine. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Catherine White from BIOS, and we're looking at seabirds in the Forth and Tay. What we're aiming to do here is to match the seabird data with the prey data. To do this, we have concurrent seabird GPS tracking data within the Forth and Tay, including tracking data from the Isle of Man, like you can see here. And what we're really aiming to do is to quantify the different possible drivers of seabird movement, behaviour and distribution, particularly when it comes to prey. And ultimately, within Prepared, what we then aim to do is to look at how these ecological relationships, these predator-prey relationships, might potentially alter in the presence of wind farms. To look at drivers of seabird movement and behaviour, we're using the movement characteristics from the tracking data to estimate times of particular behavioural states, such as foraging, commuting or resting. We're also working to develop methods to explicitly incorporate this prey data into our models of movement and behaviour, looking at what prey metrics drive seabird foraging behaviour and over what spatial and temporal scales are they relevant. For example, when we compare a static sand eel map to our new prepared sand eel data, here we can see at this estimated foraging location for seabirds that both maps show sand eels being present. However, here, for this other estimated location of foraging, we can see that only the new prepared sand eel data might explain why this foraging particularly occurred at this location. To look at drivers of seabird spatial distribution, we're working to develop spatial modelling frameworks that can incorporate all the different types of complex data that we're working with, including GPS tracking data, environmental and prey data. We're examining the importance of prey in relation to other known drivers of seabird distribution and generating predicted spatial distributions and metrics that will be incorporated into Seaboard, the impact assessment tool, going forward. We're also working to examine the transferability of the patterns and relationships that we find to other regions beyond the Forth and Tay. I'll now hand you over to Chris.
Hi, I'm Chris Pollock and I'm a quantitative ecologist at UKCEH. I'm going to present how we are applying the great empirical work being carried out by Marine Directorate and BIOS into our impact assessment tool, Seaboard. Seaboard is a mechanistic individual-based model used to simulate displacement and barrier effects on 4 species of seabird around the UK. It incorporates many different processes, which can be seen in our conceptual diagram of the model here on the right, in an attempt to represent the many relevant behaviours required to predict population level effects resulting from a proposed offshore wind farm development. This results in the main outputs of adult mass change from which we can predict overwinter survival and breeding success. We are in the process of developing more realistic tracks, incorporating things like different movement modes, which give individuals the ability to interact with their environment and exhibit foraging decisions in accordance with the constraints they're up against. This is a prerequisite step to introducing realistic prey distributions from Marine Directorate and eventually, as empirical evidence permits, interaction with offshore wind farms, as seen here on the right in this example. Following this, we will run a series of experiments to test the updated model's capability at an SPA in England to ensure transferability. So to wrap up, the main outputs from this work will be the characterisation of prey distributions relating to environmental drivers and wind farms from Marine Directorate. BIOS will provide insight into how seabird movement and distribution responds to wind farms and prey. Then UKCEH will apply these efforts in updating Seaboard with realistic tracks for interaction with prey and offshore wind farms, with an accompanying open source release on GitHub promoting transparency and transferability. Together, these outputs will deliver improved confidence in the complex element of environmental impact assessments and an improved application of tools in new regions. I just want to say thanks to all involved with the work and thanks for listening today, and we're happy to take any questions.
Hi, I'm Alex Banks. I'm Principal Specialist for Ornithology in Natural England, and I'm the Chair of the Highly Mobile Species Technical Advisory Group for our project Poseidon, and I'm going to introduce the tools from Poseidon which represent new marine biodiversity risk mapping for offshore wind. So we first conceived the idea of Poseidon about 5 years ago. We were thinking in Natural England about the mitigation hierarchy and specifically about the avoidance part of that hierarchy. And we were aware of some great data products that already existed, such as the One Benthic tool that CFAS had built to describe benthic habitats and communities, as well as the seabird sensitivity tool that the Marine Directorate had commissioned UKCEH to build, using some of the products from the Marine Ecosystems Research Programme, which James Waggett at Bangor University had produced for seabirds and marine mammals. And our idea was to bring all of this information together into one place so that we could have an integrated ecological risk map to inform the avoidance of the most ecologically sensitive areas for the planning of offshore wind. Our intended impact was to improve the evidence base to support decision making for offshore wind farms, and as I said, to avoid those most ecologically sensitive areas for seabirds, for marine mammals and for benthic habitats and communities, and in doing so contribute towards achieving net zero alongside thriving marine nature in line with Natural England's offshore wind vision. We were lucky that the Offshore Wind Evidence and Change Programme funded by the Crown Estate liked Poseidon and gave us funding to run the project in line with their aim to facilitate the sustainable and coordinated expansion of offshore wind, supporting clean, healthy, productive and biologically diverse seas. So we formed our project group, which has a project advisory group comprising the organisations listed on the slide, as well as our 2 key delivery partners, CFAS and Bangor University, who also work with UKCEH and CREAM to do the highly mobile species side of the project. As I said, the project's been running for about 4 years now, and it's divided into these various work streams. The first work stream was to firstly collate as much of the existing information on seabirds, marine mammals and benthic habitats and communities as we could, and then to collect some new data to fill gaps. For highly mobile species, we collected new data from digital aerial surveys in the areas shown on red on the maps, and we brought together existing boat-based and aerial transect data. We have about 2 million kilometres squared of survey effort across all of the UK waters that we're looking at. For benthic, we focus predominantly on grab samples, and on the map on the right you can see in blue the existing grab samples that were in the One Benthic database, and in yellow new samples which are either added through Poseidon or as part of the collation. The benthic team also brought together trawl samples and some drop-down video imagery into their database. Once we'd collated and collected all of these data, we moved to the next work stream, which is the spatial modelling. Preem are producing the highly mobile species models, and you can see an example here on the left. We have 27 seabird species and 12 marine mammals, one map per species per month that can also be aggregated into different seasons and responses to different pressures. On the right, you can see an example from CFAS's mapping work, mapping biodiversity across the extent that you can see here. CFAS have about 15,000 samples informing their spatial models, and as previously mentioned, we've got over 2 million square kilometre of survey effort for the highly mobile species models. The highly mobile species models are GAMS, generalised additive models, with a 5 by 5 kilometre spatial resolution using data going back about 25 years. The CFAS models are on a 1 by 1 kilometre resolution using random forest models and clustering to describe key areas of biodiversity and rarity and sensitivity. Having built the spatial models, the next step is to turn these into sensitivity maps, and we do that by the methods outlined in this paper by Sertan et al. From 2015, which is specifically about how to map vulnerability of animal communities in marine systems to various pressures. Obviously, we're looking specifically at offshore wind. And this approach results in an equation at the bottom right of the screen here, effectively saying that sensitivity is a product of the various criteria that we define, which includes metrics of conservation importance, as well as expected responses to pressures associated with offshore wind. And these resulting sensitivity scores are combined with the abundance and density information from the spatial models to give us our spatial risk map. The final work stream is to bring all of this together so that we have one risk map incorporating seabird risk, marine mammal risk, and benthic habitat and community risk. We're also aware of the increased consent risk that comes from designated sites, and so in addition to the environmental risk shown through the first stage, we're also bringing in consent risk, particularly for SPAs, SACs, and MCZs. All of these tools will be launched later in 2025. They'll all be publicly available and free to use. They should be made available through the Crown Estate's Marine Data Exchange, and there'll be a dashboard where people can call up the layers they like, download them, and use them, hopefully, both to inform planning of new offshore wind, but potentially also for other applications, including possibly application into impact assessment. We'll be doing a lot of thinking on that and providing advice when the tools are launched later this year. If you'd like to be kept updated as the project comes to a conclusion, then please contact my colleague Lucy Hawkin, whose email address is shared here. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Bryony Baker and I'm a Senior Marine Renewables Ornithologist at JNCC, as well as a Technical Specialist on the POCB project, which is Post-Lariform Behaviour and Demographics. This project is funded by the Crown Estate under the Offshore Wind Evidence and Change Programme. JNCC lead the project with a number of collaborators, including OXNAV, the RSPB, and the University of Gloucestershire. This is a 3-year project, and we completed the first year and are going into now the second year of field work. I'm going to run through everything very quickly. I've only got 7 minutes, so if you'd like some more information, all of the outputs from the project that are currently available will be on the Marine Data Exchange, so feel free to go there to look at our annual report, from which all of today's kind of graphs and things have been taken from. So the purpose of the project is to inform offshore wind development in the Celtic, Irish and Northwest Scottish seas. The aim is to reduce uncertainty of the effects of offshore wind on rank shearwaters and storm petrels. The UK has large populations of all three of the species, so manx shearwater in particular. They're globally important, and has the potential to be a contenting risk in the future, as we have limited knowledge on the behaviour of these species and how they might interact with offshore wind in the future. In particular, we don't know enough about their spatial interaction with potential offshore wind, or whether there's a significant impact pathway for these species. So this project will look at sea behaviour, as well as flight heights and flight speeds, to identify important areas for the SPA populations. We're also going to try to produce key demographic rates and best practice population modelling methods, which will be crucial for the impact assessment process. And the final output will be the production of best practice guidelines for shearwaters and storm petrels in offshore wind impact assessments. So that's a very busy graph, but it's just to show where we'll be looking at species across all of the work packages. Work package 1 is run by OXNAV, and that's focused on manx shearwaters. So in year 1, they've so far carried out tracking of breeding adults during incubation and chick rearing, as well as tracking of immature birds at 3 SPA colonies, ScotMER, Copeland and Brum. They've deployed GLS tags on breeding shearwaters and all three SPAs, which are planned for retrieval in 2026. And this graph is an immature shearwaters tracked using their snapper GPSs from Copeland, Brum and ScotMER. They've also successfully recorded fledgling movements in the Irish and Celtic seas, which are shown by this image here, and that includes looking at diving behaviour. And finally, the kind of last element of the work package is to look at some flight height information. So they've been carrying out some trials with barometric altimeters, and so far there's a good indication that the work that the tags they've used do work and provide some realistic estimates of flight height. There have been some issues with battery life, and they'll be needing some adjustments, but it's looking positive going into the next field season. Work package 2 is led by the RSPB, and that's focused on European and leachate storm petrels. This has already been covered in a talk by the RSPB on the Ornithology Day, so I'm not going to go into it now. So please, if you'd like to learn about this part, then go and have a look at that talk. Work package 3 is led by JNCC, and we're collecting flight height data using laser rangefinders as an alternative and complementary method to telemetry. We're looking at behavioural data, and particularly trying to target adverse weather conditions which might be missed during traditional surveys. In year 1, we started off doing land-based observations, and we collected 216 records for manx shearwater only in total, and we were kind of working on refining the methodology because this is quite a new technique, especially for shearwaters and storm petrels. Through the data collection we did, as well as calibration trials, we found that the range of the devices we were using in year 1 was limited to a maximum of 300 metres, which was quite restrictive. We don't have sufficient data at the moment to calculate representative flight heights, but the data do point towards a range of heights for manx shearwaters, a positive, but at this point not significant relationship with flight heights and wind speeds, but that's due to our small sample size, and we're hoping that will improve going forward. We're going to be moving to boat-based work in year 2, and that should substantially eliminate some of our issues that we experienced in year 1. So we're hoping to use new devices which have a greater range. We hope that birds are closer to us on vessels than they were on land, and we shouldn't have as much of a problem calibrating our height against that of the birds, because we'll have a known height above sea level on our boats. Going forward, we're going to have to repeat our calibration trial because we're going to have new devices, but so far it's been quite successful, so we're hoping that it's going to be really positive going onto boats, so we just have some more data going forward. And finally, work package 4, which is led by the University of Gloucestershire, is looking at demographic rates, refining the ones that we already have for key colonies. This is already underway for Manx shearwater and European storm petrels, and that is using capture-recapture analyses. For Manx shearwater, survival data has been used from 8 colonies so far, as shown on these graphs here. And then for European storm petrel so far, we've got data from 5 colonies. And that's for adult survival. For juvenile survival, we'll be looking at data for ScotMER and Musa for storm petrels. The modelling so far has been done using Bayesian capture-recapture models, and we're assessing the synchrony between colonies, and hopefully that will allow us to use data-rich colonies with long-term monitoring data to infer survival for colonies with less consistent monitoring. So that should be able to provide us with colony-specific survival estimates with less uncertainty. And these estimates, along with juvenile survival estimates, can then be used for population viability analyses, which will increase the accuracy and improve the spatial resolution for impact assessments for offshore wind going forward. So what are the key impacts of the project? We're hoping that we're going to have a few key ones. So we aim to significantly reduce uncertainty around whether to and how to include pro-Solar reforms in impact assessments. The project will hopefully inform policy through targeted reports and guidance for a range of stakeholders, and we plan to engage with a range of sector organisations. So through this improved evidence, we should hopefully streamline the consenting process and aid in reducing consent times. We hope that ultimately this will reduce environmental impacts associated with new offshore wind expansion on the west coast of the UK. I'd like to thank our collaborators, the funders, and if you have any questions, see the email addresses at the bottom. As I said before, the outputs of the project are going to be uploaded to the Marine Data Exchange soon. Thank you.